Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is currently November 30th, Monday, and it is Day 9 Daily, number 26. We're doing Stork vs. Movie. I forgot to open up the map last time, so I reopened it, and everything blacked out, so I am rebooting once again. Here I am. Hello, everybody. For those of you who are tuning in right now, unfortunately, I'm going to repeat myself just a little bit, so that way we make sure that the on-demand viewers can get everything properly, because well over half my viewers, I believe, are the people who use on-demand, so big heart to them, yay. All I was really saying last time is that this game is much different from the other Protoss vs. Protoss we watched. In the other Protoss vs. Protoss, we got to, which was Backho vs. Han on this map, we got to see both players do a much more later game-oriented style. They expanded a whole bunch early on. A lot of units from Backho trying to abuse a very mobile, zealot-heavy army. And then we had Han, on the other hand, going for Reavers after his expansion and doing a much more muscular, much more gas-heavy army. And Han ended up coming up on top. Let's take a brief look at the map and talk about that a little bit in the context of this Stork vs. Movie game. So Storks and Movie are spawning in these two positions, so let's pretend that we're Protoss and we're up here. Again, our expansion's pretty easy to hold, especially with this double bridge, or excuse me, this fat bridge here and this fairly narrow choke. We can defend it with Dragoons, with range. We don't need to worry too much about having it broken early, so a lot of players like to 1-gate expand, 2-gate with range expand, something like that. And this expansion, because it's so easy to take, we just get to waltz up here, and actually this ramp is a little bit wider than it appears in this picture. They actually widened it on this side, but it's still thin here, which means you can reinforce it more easily than they can attack. So these expansions are very, very easy to take. So in terms of our little corner of the map, we like to think that, yeah, I get these three expansions, or these three bases guaranteed. And moreover, when I do have this expansion and this expansion, look at this. I have a tight triangle, very hard to penetrate into the main to drop. We can sneak back down here and maybe do some storms here. This is a lot harder to do, but the only reasonable place to pierce is right here. Here you're going to have all your units rallied. No way dropships are going to be safe moving in and out there. So really, doing a lot of expanding early not only is easy to defend these expansions, but also helps defend your main. Oh, 2 for 1. Yeah, so I'm always eager to see that sort of late game play go on. In this game, however, we end up seeing something a little different happen. I'm going to turn up the volume just a little bit, just to make sure people can hear everything properly. Oh, let me turn it down a little bit. Because I've been getting a few messages saying that they can't quite hear the action in the game. Now let's talk about these scouting probes. Look at the timing that both these players did. I spend a lot of time talking about the early scout timing of these probes. This is what a lot of players tend to do. They tend to get comfortable with a timing of sending out a scout probe, and they do that exact same thing in all three matchups. A lot of players, a lot of players, surprisingly many players, disgustingly, shockingly many players, send their first probe out, the probe that builds the pylon. They scout with it, always. If you're early expanding against a Zerg player, that makes sense. But in a lot of other circumstances, it doesn't make sense. Why is that? We always scout to make sure that we can do a necessary deviation from our build, or I should say from our opening. I always hate to use the word build. We scout to see when we need to make a deviation from our opening, and if we even need to make a deviation from our opening. So imagine, for a second, that we're playing Terran vs. Protoss, and as Terran, I'm just doing a straight-up two-factory build. It works great against early expanders, great against two-gators, it works great against someone who goes fast Reaver, it works great against everything. I don't need to scout early at all. I don't need to do it to do any deviation from my build. I only need to scout to know the positioning. So, in this game, we see both players sending the scout out after they build the gateway, and not before. Moreover, they send these probes out to scout right here. So hey, now I'm starting to see why they sent these probes out at this time. They send their first probe out after they build the gateway and they get the gas, and then they send it here and say, hey, if I see a 2-gate, I'm probably going to add another gateway on in my main while still mining gas. That's how I'm going to defend that. That is the deviation that I'm going to do. So even that little subtle thing of when I'm sending out my first probe is a huge, huge deal. Because, for instance, there was a build I actually tested out where I didn't send the probe scout, and then I tested sending the probe scout out after my first pylon, and then after I built my gateway, and then after I built my gas. I did 4 different test cases. And in each case, the later and later I sent my probe out, I was blown away at how much more money I actually ended up having. Because that one probe excuse me, will probably return 25 to 50 minerals in a fairly short period of time. So it's important to make sure that your probe isn't scouting too early. So we have the usual thing going on from both players, which is why I sort of ignored mentioning it. Both players likely getting a Zealot early, but either way, both of them getting the Cybernetics core, and this is almost always good, a Manor Pylon. I mean, let's do some math on this Manor Pylon right now. It costs 100 to build. If you cancel it before it finishes, you get 75 minerals back. That's 25 minerals it costs to place this thing down. So if you can prevent some probes from getting 3 extra minings done from this mineral patch, it's worth it. If you think you can get even more stolen, then you don't cancel this, and you continue to run around with this probe. A really great time not to cancel your Manor Pylon is if you're sending out your first Zealot to harass, which might actually be what this guy is right here. If you send your Zealot out to harass, this first Zealot, which would love to kill this Pylon, can't, because there's a Zealot running around killing off probes, so it has to deal with that threat. So let's actually, hopefully we're going to get a chance to look back at this base. Yeah, so look, this probe has been trapped back here. It's already not getting money. We have these probes going around. Manor Pylons are super, 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 super good. I actually had someone try this in Zerg vs. Zerg. Oh, the double Manor Pylon. Someone in Zerg vs. Zerg was trying to Manor Creep Colony me in like 2002. Actually, Shock, if any of you are familiar with him. He became a Warcraft 3 player. He loved Manor Sunken Colony-ing me, or Manor Creep Colony-ing me. The big thing to consider, though, when you're doing this sort of Manor Pylon is that temporarily you lose 100 minerals. Whether you cancel this or not, there's a temporary period where you're behind on 100 minerals, so that's why we see this delayed Cybernetics core. Purple, or in this case Movie, needs to make sure that he does enough damage to justify this. Because a lot of times you'll get a player who will put their opponent behind economically with this, do extra harass, making this last even longer, but then their opponent is able to tech more quickly, gets a Reaver out more quickly, and wins. Or gets a Dark Templar out more quickly, and wins. So these are all the sorts of things that I'm thinking about when I'm Manor Pyloning my opponent. And all the sorts of things that I'm really going to discuss, because other than this, things are going pretty normally. Oh, Super Zealot! Oh! I'm going to go ahead and scream with the commentators. Unbelievable. So yeah. This is a real pain in the ass to have to kill off these Manor Pylons, because not only do you have to kill it off, but you can't guard your front. And already we're seeing advantage number 1. Green, or Stork, has to spend all this extra money killing this thing off, has to draw his efforts, and was slightly delayed on range. We see range researching now, but 2 seconds ago when we were in Movie's main, we saw range researched before Stork. Range timing advantages are really big, especially in Protoss vs. Protoss, because the Dragoons are just the key unit. And if your Dragoons are outranging his Dragoons, you're in Fat City. So this is what I would call, this is, in my opinion, the most standard of Protoss openings, is to do one gateway with Dragoons, get the range, and then go straight for the robotics facility. A very common order is to make a shuttle, and then you get the Robo Bay for the Reaver, and while the Robo Bay is making, you also get the Observatory. And given this timing setup, this works very, very nicely for Movie. And you can do other things like at the gateway, but I was talking specifically about this robo timing. If you do that timing with the Reaver and the Observer pops out in time to hold off Dark Templar. The Observer will also help in scouting at some point. But the Reaver comes out at a pretty key period as well. It helps a lot of BS, cheesy sorts of builds that will try to 3 Gateway Dragoon you to death, or even 4 Gateway Dragoon you to death. That Reaver comes at a very, very key period. We do, in fact, see the Observatory coming out first. Nothing wrong with getting the fast Observatory. Again, in terms of scouting, we can get the Observers out, and we can do all sorts of scouting in our opponent's base. But we need to make sure that we have a reason for that. A lot of times when you see players rush for scout like this, it's because they have some really big transition planned in their mind. So where they would either do something like add on 2 gateways and stay on 1 base, or they would expand and do something with that. Here's another example in Zerg vs. Terran, in a style of play I used a few years back. I really needed to know if my opponent was getting 1 factory worth of tanks or 2 factories worth of tanks. So I would get the speed upgrade for the Overlords very, very early, and the main function of those speed Overlords was to check inside the Terran's base to see if he was going 2 factory or 1 factory. By the way, I wasn't going Mutalisk in this build, if you're wondering why. I mean, the Overlord Speed had the added benefit of, seeing dropships and seeing exactly where the army was moving and timing everything and getting more map control. But that is the benefit you get from having Overlord Speed. What's more important is the timing of when you start getting it. That's what I'm focusing on. Naturally, in Protoss vs. Protoss, observers are gonna help you, but we saw both players, the timing of their observatory is pretty early. So in Stork's case, I wouldn't be surprised if he's getting that observatory a little bit early because he doesn't know what Movie's doing. And Movie, on the other hand, I think because he knows exactly what Stork's doing, he's saying, hey, I really need to get some extra information with my observer to check stuff out. Everything else going on by Movie is completely standard. Both players seem to be gearing themselves towards some sort of early expand. I mean, we have this positioning down here at the low ground by both players. We even have buildings started right here. Very, very common to use 2 gateways with early range to defend your expansion. Very, very, very normal. Stork, all of a sudden now I'm thinking, maybe was not planning to do an early expansion, but was planning on a timing push. He probably is about to finish range, or just finished range. Yep, see, there's the range, it's done. And is thinking, man, if my opponent did all this harassment against me early, he probably has a later Dragoon range. So let me poke out here, let me check to see if I can do some damage. And, given the fact that I got the second gateway earlier, I probably have more units too. So this, in my eyes, is how would I put this? I don't want to call it like scouting, but I guess it's like poking in. It's poking around. You're just trying to check out if you can break your opponent because you have a little bit of a timing window because you might have Dragoon range. But look what happens. Let's check out how Stork is going to respond to this. So see, Stork's kind of poking in here. He's going to be able to do a little bit of damage. And hey, great, look, I do in fact have more units, so I'm going to push in here. If Stork had less units or equal units, he'd poke in, do some dancing, and pull right back. The other significant thing to note that I'm not going to rewind for, Stork moved like this forward and also split a probe off the group and sent it right up there. Very important to do that. Helps you keep tabs on counterattack, helps you make sure that no Reaver is going to scoot across this way. Really, really good. There's Stork looking like he's ready to kill. And see, here's that ordering that I was talking about earlier. We get this Reaver out super early after our Robo Bay, and then we get the Observer. Alternatively, if you're getting your Robo Bay a little late, or if you really wanted to use those observers to scout, or if you're worried about Dark Templar or something like that, you can sometimes go Robo, Observer, and then get the Reaver. We see another building coming up right here for the, you just build pylons at key positionings, like right here. Stork would build it, maybe right here, sometimes over here, just to keep tabs on where the shuttles are moving around. Almost always are going to build them at these sort of edges, but on match point in particular, we've seen players build pylons in some pretty kooky locations just to spot that sort of thing. And this is nightmare time in Protoss vs. Protoss. I mean, when you are contained like this, because you have this perfect concave with your Dragoons against such a small clump, concaves are one of the most important things in early game Protoss vs. Protoss. Making sure your units are positioned properly to exploit that sort of thing. And look, we see even more pylons being built, like right here, just making the big ring of stuff around our opponent's base. In this spot, as Stork, you don't really need to do harassment. In fact, I'm going to pause and say, it might even be a bad idea to do harassment, because Movie currently is cramped into his base, and almost certainly is adding on tons of gateways, maybe even up to 4 gateways. He's getting Reavers, almost certainly, so we can break out. That's going to be a very, very well-defended base, and you're not really going to do any damage with any sort of harassment, so there's no point to do it. Moreover, if you did harass, you run the risk of losing your shuttle, and then you lose your advantage with your contain. So, as we see, the angle of this guy is already heading down to bolster this containment. Now, that's not to say never, ever, ever harass when you have your opponent contained. I'm sure what Stork will end up doing is poking around just the outskirts. But what I mean is don't send your shuttle in for that mineral line, because that's just a suicide mission. So Movie's doing the correct response. Anytime you're contained like this, you need to add on a whole bunch of gateways very quickly, because that's going to be your only hopes of breaking out, is exceeding your opponent in terms of a gateway count. Stork is using this advantage to expand. I also think that is the correct sort of play that you can make here. Occasionally what you'll do in Stork's position is add on a third gateway and continue to bolster this contain, because it's going to be so hard for your opponent to break out. But really the economic choice is going to be fine, really, 99% of the time. Because this contain really is just so frightening. So let's look at how Movie's going to break this contain. First, sending the Zealots forward. The most standard thing in the world. Notice this Reaver placement. It's not here, but it's back here. A lot of that is because off this screen, you can't really see it here. You might see a little smidge there and there. There's a wall here. So in other words, this is the concave that will be surrounding these Reavers. It's not very big. If we dropped Reavers here as purple, this is the concave that green would be able to get around those Reavers. This is far and away the best spot. Especially when you're breaking a contain, the most important thing is to make sure you don't lose this Reaver. Not so much to maximize Reaver damage, because Reavers are always going to be doing a ton of damage. You just need to make sure you don't lose them. So almost certainly, this timing that Movie's using to break out is because he just finished a few production cycles on that third gateway. We need to make sure we got to make use of it. Yeah, see, losing the Reaver, very, very bad. Ugh, very icky. And check this out. Look how scary a contain is. 2 gateways versus 3 gateways. The 2 gateways ends out coming up on top by quite a significant margin. Oh, we had a little bit of game lag. That's kind of cool. You don't see that too often. But yeah, so at this point, we'd probably be like, yeah, Movie's gonna lose. I mean, Stork has his expansion up already. Stork is pushing in really, really hard. Something went a little bit wrong with this Dragoon control here. Actually, after all this stuff dies, I just want to take a brief rewind here to check that out. Don't lose this Reaver. Anytime you start getting a disadvantage here, you gotta pull back. All these Dragoons died. When your Dragoon count gets low, don't be pushing with like a Reaver and 2 Dragoons and expecting to do something with it. So let me rewind and focus a little bit on that micro that we looked at before. So see here, all the Dragoons. I like the positioning of the Dragoons now, because the Dragoons are positioned so that they hit these Dragoons. Let me stop using the word Dragoons. Green's units are positioned nicely to hit Purple's units right when they pop out of these gateways. Instead, they all wander up here, and for some reason are target firing this Dragoon. I prefer this contain right here, because what happens is we're actually forcing Purple to bring units down here. We're forcing Movie to bring more units this way. The more we start moving up here, we're sort of heading towards the Robo Bay, the gateways, and when units pop out here, if we have probes coming from above, Stork, or Green in this case, gets trapped. And we saw a little bit of that here, where really there were a few Dragoons up here and a Reaver, and then 3 Dragoons popped out here, and these 5 Dragoons were surrounded and died very, very, very quickly because Purple had a bigger concave. Again, concave's super, super important in Dragoon versus Dragoon battles. In this state, I would not be going for more contain until I was really, really comfortable and had a really high Dragoon count. So now we see about 4 or 5 Dragoons heading out there for Stork. So he's in good shape. If you have like a Dragoon and a Reaver, especially if that Reaver doesn't have speed, or excuse me, the shuttle, but you know, Reavers and shuttles are basically the same thing in this matchup at this stage. If you have a small amount of stuff, you really should be very careful with your containment. See, look. Woo! We've zoomed in. Movie got speed for his shuttles because Movie knows the only way he's going to come back in this game is either with a really powerful push at the front, which demands maneuverability of this shuttle, which is why he got speed, and another way he's going to come back in this game is if he does some insane harassment over here with speed shuttles. So now we're seeing why Stork's placement of those pylons is so important. Whoops, it's hard to get around that. So we see Stork repositioning himself, and Stork, look, after he lost all those units, pulling so many back, so many Dragoons coming back here to defend, the containment basically fell apart. I mean, if this shuttle had tried to do this stuff earlier, Stork would have left almost his entire contain there and would have just stopped rallying Dragoons to the front. Stork would have rallied them to his expansion, held off the harass, and then not really worried so much about it. And then when Stork sees this shuttle pass by this line of pylons, then he can bring more Dragoons over. Still not the worst situation for Stork to be in. If I'm in Stork's shoes right now, what I'm really thinking is, man, my big attack just got killed. I really, really need to add on way more gateways. So that way I don't die. Great, we have 4 gateways coming out. Wouldn't mind 5. 4's fine. Continues, I would think, yeah, I really need to continue making my Dragoon count very high. But I'm not positive I like this sort of harassment unless you have observers that have checked it out. Because look at what's going to happen to Stork. Stork just got crushed. Look how many Dragoons of his died. Let's actually count those. We're starting to see why the concave advantage is so important. I don't know if you can see, but on the minimap there's actually some purple Dragoons right here. Or in other words, up here. I'm going to draw a little arrow with my mouse. So look how horrible this concave is for Stork. He moves up like this, thinking, hey, I'm going to make this concave around these units. But little does he know that there's a ton up here that ends up crushing it from above. See, look, he's running into units. Look how spread out Purple's units are in this nice big arc, and how weirdly, it's like a backwards arc for Stork. Worst position to be in, the good old backwards concave. Or should I say, the convex. And look at this. Suddenly, we've lost a bunch of units. Now let me give my analysis of before this attack. Stork had a really good containment on, and he got his expansion up. Fantastic. At this stage, Stork needs to think, alright, sweet, I'm in the lead. Great. My containment worked. I got this expansion up. The containment didn't work because he killed off a whole bunch of units. It didn't work because he was able to get up into Movie's main. Those are like added bonuses. What is the main point, or what is the primary reason you ever want to do contain in this sort of spot, is so you can get some sort of economic advantage and some map control out of it. It's exactly what's happened to Stork. Then all of a sudden, Stork moves into Movie's main. He kills off Movie's first push and then moves into Movie's main. Completely reasonable decision. But then he loses almost all his units. At this stage, I think, whoa, okay, I really got to calm down. I need to add a whole bunch more gateways so I can get a critical number of units so I don't die now. And then I'm getting my 3rd earlier. My army's getting bigger already. And I'm going to win a little bit later on. Because with any economic advantage you gain, your economy gives you an advantage later. It doesn't give you an advantage now. If I just built 35 drones, that means the longer the game goes on, the more these drones will have an added effect for me. If I get 35 drones, it doesn't mean suddenly I'm in a good position. So that's exactly what I see going on with Stork. This attack, I saw this happening when I originally watched the game and was just like, why are we trying to bash our opponent down? I mean, for instance, imagine if Stork and Movie got their expansions at the same time. Let's actually go back and look at the main screen and check this map out. Imagine if Stork had got this expansion a little bit early, and Movie was getting this expansion a little bit later, but maybe was low on units for whatever reason. Then Stork might think, yeah, man, I'm going to come in here and stop this. Actually, I said it backwards. Suppose Movie gets his expansion up a little bit earlier, and Stork is a little bit behind. So Stork says to himself, man, I really don't want this economy to get going, so I'm going to move in here with my number of Dragoons, which should be bigger than my opponent's at this point. I'm going to move in here with my bigger amount of Dragoons and kill this expansion with a big timing attack, and then I'm set. In a sense, that's what we actually saw at the start of the game. Stork moved in with a really good timing, killed off of his expansion, contained him, and then Stork expanded a little bit later. And then in that position, there's no need to do a lot of super intense attacking and harassment. So this is the part where I just wanted to puke. It depresses me because Stork has been, really is an unbelievable, phenomenal Protoss player, but has lost the last 5 games that I've watched. And it bums me out more and more, which is again why I'm sincerely hoping that cast is because he broke his arm, just punching someone right in the face. Oh, man. So here's some harass by Movie. Notice how good this harass is, given the current state of things. There we go. Stork just lost a whole bunch of Dragoons doing this attack. Stork just pulled a small number of Dragoons out to the front to defend. So this shuttle is going to be extra effective because it has speed against almost certainly a small number of Dragoons. Let's actually watch Movie's troop movement here. So see, look at this. Everything's moving up. Here's the positioning of Stork's units. Haha, I'm ready for some attack. These Dragoons are going to move down, and Observer's moving up, keeping tabs on these units. Here, this is what I refer to as a tactic, right? We can incorporate this drop into our play, and it doesn't affect our overarching strategy. So these Dragoons move down, just covering this flight path a little bit, making sure there's nothing kooky going on down here, no units hanging out. The Observer's checking out everything up here, and this, yeah, see, there's the Observer that just went by, and then the Speed Shuttle now coming up. And then watch the minimap, you're going to see a whole bunch of units pull back. There we go, so we see units coming right back across the ramp. Some of those Dragoons that just finished, not too many. It's smart by Stork not to bring everything from his front. But this harass is ultra effective, given the fact that Movie just killed off so many Dragoons. And now, actually rolling on just a little bit. So Stork correctly brings some Dragoons back. You don't want to bring all of them. I did say that because sometimes it's an easy mistake to make. But really, this harass is so good that now Stork does clearly see that he needs to bring all of his Dragoons back. And we see all the Dragoons at his front. At his front, just the shuttle and the 2 Reavers with maybe an extra Dragoon. Yep, there, right there. Sick prediction by me. So this is an awkward spot for Stork to be in because, frankly, he shouldn't have gotten this far behind. He should have been with 5 gateways and all these Dragoons and everything, the Reavers, and against his opponent, who is just now getting an expansion and has a pretty low unit count. Instead, Movie has a higher unit count because he's won the last 2 battles by a pretty significant margin, done a pretty good harass as well, and now has just gotten his expansion up, is feeling pretty comfortable economically. So suddenly, this game is very even. I would not want to say that Movie has won by any means, but I do want to say that Stork was at a big, giganto advantage and lost it, and now Movie's right back in the game. And this harassment, this is why we don't like speed shuttles. Let me phrase that. This is why we don't like shuttles with no speed. Because what is this going to do with its slow, sluggy harass? And this is another great example of bad harassment angles. So here's Stork. Wow. If Stork had a huge army, let's say, for instance, if Stork hadn't have lost all these units with his bad attack and had a clear army advantage, you can do risky things like send a shuttle to the other side of the map and then hook it upwards. But look at the green blob advancing. Because this blob is now pushing up here, Stork runs the risk of losing this expansion. And Stork cannot bring this harassment shuttle back. Let's stop and think about Movie's position. And I'm going to actually open up the map. If we're Movie and we want to harass Stork over here, we can move out with our army like this, and if we harass on the close side, we can poke around here, and we can join our army again immediately and either push the front or deal with a counter push by Stork. Like, let's say Movie moved out here and Stork was like, oh, I can kill that, and moves forward, and Movie says, oh crap, let's not harass, moves back and hooks and is back, and can easily defend with his army at this double bridge. If you're Stork, though, and you're harassing like this, Movie is right here on this map right now, and he's getting ready to push. There is no good angle. If you head straight back, you have to pass over the units. If you head back this way, you run the risk of being too late. If you head up this way, you also have a similar risk of dying to Movie's units, which are passing all throughout this area. And this is just depressing to watch. So look, Movie really has played everything pretty normally up to this point. He's played very correctly and well. And see, here's the Reaver drop. Ooh, that's actually very sloppy by Movie. I don't... I guess I wasn't watching when that Reaver shot went off. Yeah, so see, that harassment is really good. You'd think, but then all of a sudden, here's the big attack right here. How does this Reaver end up coming back here to defend this in time? First of all, notice how Movie lost his Reaver. Purple lost his shuttle and 2 Reavers really early on without, frankly, doing very much damage at all. However, Movie had so many more units, because Stork had lost so many units beforehand, that it doesn't even matter. Look at this. Movie is now pushing up here, and Stork is freaking out, because it's a smaller Dragoon count to a larger Dragoon count. Oh my god, 11 kills. This is, outrageous. I mean, that's cool to see, but in a sense it doesn't even matter. You want that harass to happen but you want to be in a position where you can deal with a counterattack. Pretend for a moment that Stork hadn't lost all those units early on, had just stayed with his economic advantage, and done this same hook across the map. This Reaver would have done the exact same amount of damage, Movie would have done this counter push, and Movie would not have gotten this far at all. Movie would have been stopped dead. And then Movie, having lost 20 probes and just lost a huge push, would have immediately just good gamed. Unfortunately for Stork, yeah, the Reaver Harass is doing some damage, but frankly, that Reaver needed to be back here preventing this push from ever happening. And the only thing the Reaver could really do when this harassment started was to suicide harass. Yeah, look, here's the shuttle. Still hasn't even made its way home yet. And Stork somehow, mind-blowingly, is losing his expansion. So Stork's doing the right thing. He's trying to come back down here, get a good positioning again to retake his expansion. But let's go back and watch that. Look, Stork has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I count 7 Dragoons, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Great. Equal numbers of Dragoons. Yeah, one just died. There's the other one. Watch how much more damage these are going to do because they have a little bit of a concave. It's incredible. And there's a little probe doing some action down here. Moreover, Movie's Dragoons were initially damaged from the push. So these damaged Dragoons managed to kill off an equal number of Dragoons. And then with reinforcements, bam, expansion's dead. Ugh. Vomit. Oh man, I just feel so bad for Stork. I like him so much. I just hope he doesn't break his other hand in rage. Even though that would be super manly. My god, that would be macho. Something to note about what Movie's doing right now, pulling all the guys out of gas. Very good technique to do in Protoss vs. Protoss when you're behind. Just pulling a bunch of guys out of gas. You'd be blown away at how little gas you actually need when you're going Dragoon Reaver. In fact, it surprises me every single time. You can pull a lot of guys out of gas for quite some time. You see, now we have some guys going back in the gas. Just doing a little thing like that, just popping Dragoons out, popping guys out of the gas, and just going for a lot of Dragoons being added back on. You can get way, way farther than you normally would in Protoss vs. Protoss. I mean, it's so instinctive just to always have 3 in the gas, but this is a good spot for Movie to do that sort of thing. So now, watch what Movie's doing. Movie just killed off this expansion. Movie just killed off this expansion, and Movie knows I have an expansion. What does this mean? Movie does not need to attack. He does not need to push his advantage and go up here and try to kill his opponent. He needs to defend so that way he can let his economic advantage slowly extend over time. Exactly what Stork should have done earlier, we're seeing Movie do right now. Look at this beautiful concave of units right here from Movie. Look at how there are no shuttles anywhere from Movie trying to do any movement down here on this minimap. Yeah, good try, Stork, but you don't have any units. Oh, man. And look at this is going to be completely crushed. Completely decimated. Stork wasn't even behind by a huge number of Dragoons, but because that concave is going to help so much, there's really nothing that Stork could do at that point. You need to be vastly ahead in units in order to break that sort of concave. So there's Stork being sad. I want to go ahead and review that game, and because there's about 4 or 5 key points, let's just do it in ninja mode. So I spent a lot of time talking about manor pylons and this sort of thing, and then, so here we see Stork adding on a second gateway pretty fast. There, it just went down. Second gateway before Robo Bay. So he's going to have 1 or 2 Dragoons out before his opponent does. And we have, and in Stork's mind, Stork's saying, hey, and even if my opponent did get the second gateway early, I might beat him to range. So then Stork does the right thing. Stork pokes in, as I put. He checks to see if he can do any damage. This sort of attack is designed to abuse a handful of things and back off from everything else. Here's one of the things it's designed to abuse. It's coming in right here. It's going to abuse this expansion. And see this advantage right now? This is all because Stork got that extra gateway. Look, we have 4 Dragoons, and actually 1 died down here, so it's 5 Dragoons from Movie. And a Zealot against 6 Dragoons and a Zealot. And with just a little bit of superior micro, Stork's going to be killing off way more stuff. So right now, Stork's in Fat City. And notice, Movie expanded earlier than Stork did. Therefore, Stork can punish with units. And now, as we zoom forward, Stork gets a contain up. And then Stork is expanding. And we like to think of this contain as a defensive move. Stork is containing his opponent to defend this expansion. So at this stage, everything Stork does should be geared towards defending this expansion. Okay, so we're crushing this push. Good, we're having good defense. We want to make sure our defense as Stork is very, very strong. Fantastic. And we see, man, my opponent doesn't actually even have any Reavers left. Let me go try to kill my opponent right now. Fine, absolutely correct thing to do. But I also want to start adding on some more gateways, especially as I see this attack failing. And, especially after the attack does fail pretty bad. That's a lot of Dragoons to fall. Need to add on a lot of Dragoons, and if I'm Stork, this is what I want to do. Make a big concave at my front, and just worry about playing defensively until I feel like I have enough units. And see, Stork tried to do a light contain, but has to pull back, and then should defend with these units. Yeah, and so he needs to defend from harassment. He needs to defend from some sort of push. Here's some harassment that's doing a pretty good job. And then Stork... So Stork, right now, again, Stork is defending, or has expanded long before his opponent has. So Stork should just let his economic advantage grow and grow and grow until he can abuse it at a later point in time. But we're attacking now as Stork? Ooh, I'm not so sure I'd stand behind that. These gateways just finished. We don't really have any advantage from these gateways yet. They really haven't completed any production cycles whatsoever. And look how badly this attack gets crushed. I mean, just completely decimated. Not even close. Way more units lost by Stork than lost by Movie. So now Movie gets to do this counter push. And this is where Stork starts to fall apart a little bit. This harassment delays mining, kills off yet more Dragoons. Even more Dragoons are being killed off. Notice how none of the Reavers die. It's just like, or excuse me, one of the Reavers die, but it's 4 Dragoons that get killed off. And then, so Movie is right back in the thick of things, feeling comfortable. And then this harassment happens. And Stork, who lost so many Reavers to this harassment, lost money and time to the harassment up here. And he lost all these units to this failed attack over here, is sending a shuttle to harass? That's weird, because then this attack works beautifully, even after Movie loses 2 of his Reavers without really doing anything. Look at this. Complete crushing defeat right there. I think Stork really did 2 big errors there. And now, Movie does the correct thing. He kills off this expansion. He knows he can't defend this with a contain, because there are going to be Reavers and more Dragoons coming out here. So he just pulls back and defends, and does exactly what Stork should have done earlier, which is to let that economic advantage play out. So now I'm going to open it up for a few questions. I know that some of you are using the new interface. If you're ever looking to do the old style of live stream, go to livestream.com/StriderDoom/old. You do the exact same URLs before, but you just put old at the end of it. First thing I wanted to spend a little time talking about as we wait for some questions to roll in is that someone was asking about this APM program that I say. And I've said this in a few casts before. I'll definitely say it frequently. First, start spamming. Right? Step 1 is to spam with your APM. So, for instance, at the start of the game, I use 1 and 5 as my first overlord and as my hash. So I'm going to go 1 5 1 5 1 5 1 5 1 5 1 5, and then I'm going to do another action and then go right back to going 1 5 1 5 1 5 1 5. Seems dumb to just spam. So let's say my APM was at 100 and I work it up to 200 just with this regular spamming. Right now, my play is probably slightly worse than it was before, or at the same place I was before. But what's interesting is that if you start focusing a ton on spamming, just like 4 5 4 5 5 6 5 6, like this sort of thing, because that's the main focus of your play, you start doing the other actions more quickly. So that way you can go back to spamming. So whereas before I would be like, select drone, send it to mine, do something else, I'm going spam, 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 select drone, send to mine, do something else. It's happening way, way faster. And what's really interesting is that over time, once you have built up this comfort with hitting a bunch of buttons and you're playing at 220 actions per minute, granted you're playing very poorly, but you're still playing at 220 actions per minute, you can start translating all that comfort with speed over into doing things very quickly. In my experience, I worked my APM from 200 to 300 in about 2.5, 3 weeks. And I was doing tons of spamming. And now I still have 300, 310 APM. Actually, 310 was almost exactly my APM. I have very little deviation from that. But like 310 for a very long time with almost no spamming. Now I just am aware of all the stuff I need to do, and I just do it quickly. So that is my way to do it. Is just to artificially spam to just elevate it, and then slowly translate that over to usefulness. So yeah, that's my APM program. Let's go ahead and take some questions. I would prefer if you guys posted in some bright colored font. I haven't chosen what the correct font color should be. It used to be yellow because that showed up really nicely on the dark black background. But since some of you are using the new software that has the white background, yellow will hurt your eyes. It'll make your brain explode. So yes. Oh, this is a great question by Fantasy Monkey. Fantasy Monkey says, so why was Stork's counter-harass so much worse than Movie's harass, even though Stork got more probes? Let's think about Movie's situation. Actually, let's begin with Stork's situation. Stork expanded earlier, but has fewer units, is more spread out, and likely doesn't have speed shuttles. Movie, because he got contained, built those extra gateways early, so Movie has more units, and has speed shuttles, and has less area to defend. So, in Movie's perspective, he has two advantages. He has more units, which means that if he gets control over the middle, there's very little Stork can do about that. And because Stork is spread out and is low on units, harassment is very, very effective, because you have to spread your already small number of units over a wider area. So that will help Movie get back into the game. Stork, on the other hand, was ahead in economy. He had a lot of units. He was like a little bit behind on units, and his opponent had more units. So if you're behind on units and you start doing harassment, you run the risk of just getting killed. When Movie harassed, if Movie harasses with just a shuttle, Movie also has the advantage of having all these Dragoons and a ram. So if Stork tries to counter, Stork will die. Stork really just needs to defend the harassment. In Stork's case, when Stork was doing harassment, Movie just countered and won. So those are some things to think about. So yeah. Okay, so Pack says, what do you feel about when to get speed lots in Protoss vs. Protoss? I think a very simple standard timing for getting speed zealots is around when you have 4 or 5 gateways and an expansion. That is about the reasonable time. And especially on Destination, we tend to see like 6 or 7 gateways before we get our next expansion. And we make Dragoons early, and then we flood with a lot of zealots, and we get Archons. That's a really standard practice on Destination. But 4 or 5 seems like the first time where it's about reasonable to think about zealot leg speed. Depends on what you're doing, obviously, but I would say before then seems weird. I mean, if you're just going like 2 zealot, 2 gate speed lots, yeah, that's not going to do too well against like 3 gate Dragoon with Reavers. Blah. So King SP for DE20 says, do you still play Brood War, or do you mostly just watch games now? Do you play on IC Cup? I am taking this question because a lot of people have been asking this lately, even though it doesn't have anything to do with this game. I'm not playing Brood War purely because of time. If I was playing StarCraft, I would have 2 or 3 hours a day I would be playing in a pretty stressful environment. I mean, there's a lot of adrenaline going on. But because I have so much stress in other places with life, with all these bazillions of projects I'm doing, I instead only do 1 hour 5 days a week, and it's very relaxing just to talk and blab. I enjoy it. It helps me wind down, actually. So, and plus, I get to do nice things for the community. That's always been so nice to me. So, Zergs Needs Food. You have been sending me your replays, so I will definitely take your question. And I'll also talk about the replays in just a little bit, the replay submissions. It says, so considering that you're emphasizing the importance of passive play, when are the best times to play aggressively? I want to rephrase that a little bit. No, I don't. You actually phrased it beautifully. So I'm going to say it one more time. Zerg Needs Food says, so because you're emphasizing the importance of passive play, I misread it at first and thought it was just the emphasizing passive play. So considering that you're emphasizing the importance of passive play, one of the best times to play aggressively. A lot of times it's an option, like how are you going to deal with something? That sounds very vague. Allow me to make it concrete. Easiest example, Zerg vs. Terran. I'm playing Zerg vs. Terran, and I'm very aware of the Terran's mid-game push. Once Terran gets that Science Vessel out, he's moving out with between 25 and 40 Medic Marine, 3 or 4 tanks, and 1 Science Vessel. The standardest, normalest thing in the world is this push coming out. How do I deal with it? One, I could play aggressively and batter the Terran down in this key period where he might not have Marine range, where he's doesn't have a good tank placement, is low on Marine count, something like that. I can batter him down there, and that way I will delay the Terran mid-game push, and I'll be prepared for it that way. Or you can do a style that I've tried to work on a lot, which is to do almost no harassment with Mutalisks, and instead to just manage lurkers and manage economy timing very well, so that way, even though he gets a very fast mid-game push, I can still just take it out straight on. They all have their advantages and disadvantages. So that's an example of choice. Sometimes where I think that necessity is clear is when your opponent starts expanding a bunch and has overextended himself, you really need to start tuning up your aggression in order to abuse that quite a bit. Classic example is in Zerg vs. Protoss. Zergs used to expand quite a bit, but Protosses started to realize that if they just moved out early with like 8 Zealots with speed and like 6 Corsairs, they could do worlds of damage. And in fact, playing Protoss against Zerg, that's one of the most important matchups to really have absurd amounts of pressure. Just pounding the Zerg down, especially in Terran vs. Zerg too, just pounding the Zerg down, being very aggressive, being very up in his face. The one caveat I would have to that is whenever you are being aggressive, make sure that you're not attacking just for the sake of attacking. Do something like move in towards an expansion. Can I kill it? Oh no, therefore I will back off. Just the way that Stork moved into Movie's expansion, because again, if you're expanding earlier as Movie, you know that Movie has fewer units. So Stork moves into there to attack, and if Movie wasn't early expanding, or if Movie had too many units, Stork would just happily pull back and go right back to playing passive play. So those are some things that to think about. I could elaborate a little bit more, but I want to take some more questions. So Hart asks, how do you force a concave that can help in a fight in lower level games? So, oopsie daisies, I just scrolled right past it. How can you force a concave that can help you in a fight in lower level games, if at all? Is this concave most important in Protoss vs. Protoss? What about tanks in Terran vs. Protoss, or in ZVZ with Zerglings? Dragoons are the most important one, I think, to emphasize concave, just getting a really good concave there. So a lot of times what you'll do is you'll decide on a few key locations. Like, let's just go back to the screen. In my eyes, a key location is right out here, if you have your opponent contained, or here, outside his ramp. That's good. Anytime you see a choke, you should imagine building a concave on this side. Here's another choke, building a concave like this for defense. Those are some very, very standard places to be thinking about concaves. And that's how I would say that you force a concave. Later on, that's why we actually get speed zealots a lot of the times. Because we can do things like, if our opponent's army is like this, and we're coming from below, we run past it with the speed zealots, and then clamp like this. So we've created a big concave. Zerg vs. Zerg, man, that's tricky, and it's really hard, because while you're readjusting your Zerglings for the concave, you're still taking extra hits, which can come back and bite you in the ass. There's a game I actually saw recently, I can't remember who played in it, but it was also on Fighting Spirit, where the player readjusted his Zerglings a little bit and had a beautiful concave, but he'd taken a few extra hits, so all the Zerglings popped, even though he had more of them, and my, were his cheeks ever red. Chosen says, Stork's biggest blunder in my eyes was that when he attacked after his first push into Movie's main failed. I can't think of a reason why he would do that. Can you? That is actually a really good question. I actually want to go back here and think about this from Stork's position. So, what I think probably happened here, and you know what? One thing I love about Chosen's question is it points out what potential erroneous thinking did Stork have after this attack that I want to avoid in the future. So I think what happened after, so Stork's just lost this attack, and Stork is then going to push forward right about here. Yeah, right about now. And the question is, why on earth is Stork doing this? in my eyes, I believe Stork is doing this because he probably thinks he has way more units than he actually does. It's a very normal mistake to make, but you get to the situation where you're going, yeah, I'm totally fine. I mean, I got this expansion up earlier. He just tried to harass me with a Reaver, and I just shirked it off like it was nothing. Time to just continue exploiting my advantage. I mean, for instance, if we're playing a Protoss versus Protoss, and you have 120 food, and your opponent has 30 food, attack him. I don't even care what position he's in. Just attack him. So I think that was a gross misjudgment on Stork's part to think that he actually had way more units than he did. So, and I can't quite see on this minimap here, there might be some observers that are seeing some things that I'm not from this main screen. So Stork may have had an incorrect unit count here. So I don't mind moving here and trying to do some pushing, but coming all the way up here seems a little bit excessive. It seems like you're just trying to kill your opponent. This is where Stork was probably saying, holy shit, this guy actually has way more units than I thought. My god. So I think that after you lose big attacks, especially in the early and mid game, it's very easy not to realize how greatly that's affected you. That was actually one of my biggest blunders early on, especially when I was trying to figure out styles where I wasn't harassing with Mutalisk too much. I would do a big push against my opponent early, and it would fail, but for some reason I would think, well, you know, he lost a bunch too, let me keep playing. And then when his next attack happened, he would just kill me, and it'd be like, wow, he just had a lot of units. Maybe he has just good macro. And as it turns out, when I stopped doing these sorts of suicidal attacks, he would still push at the exact same time he did before, but I would have way more units and I'd be able to kill it off. Kenny says, if Stork had not attacked Movie towards the end of the game and gotten massacred, could he have a decent chance at winning due to his Reaver harassment? Yeah, you know what? I think that no matter what Stork did, if he didn't make that early mistake, I think he was just in a good position to win. He had more units, so he could defend himself more easily. He had an earlier expansion, so he's obviously farther down the tech tree. So that way he can comfortably harass, he can comfortably not harass and expand, he can comfortably just save up, build up a big attack, and kill Movie or just contain. So many options available to Stork if he just did not make that horrific late game choice. So, yeah, I want to take... Okay, let's do this one. Inhale says, how does this concave differ when you have a late game army with speedlots and goons and Templar as opposed to early game? This unfortunately will have to be my last question because I actually have a meeting -3 minutes ago that I kind of forgot about, so I need to speed up a touch. So, how does the concave differ? A lot of mid-game army movement will happen, so let's just go back to the main screen and check out Fighting Spirit. If you have a blob like this and your opponent has a blob like this, you're really looking for ways to catch him off guard. So, for instance, if this blob moves up right here, you want to cut right here, and it's still basically the same thing, except there's more mobility. So, with Dragoons, you kind of think, I'm going to set up a static concave here, or a static concave here, or a static concave here. But when you have these blobs moving around the middle of the map, you think, here's a choke point that I really want to cut him off with. So you kind of run with your speed zealots here, and then you come back this way to kill stuff off. An actually fantastic example of that is in Han vs. Bako that we saw about a week ago. So if you want to see some great late game commentaries on concaving there, or just a late game visual of it, rewatch that game. It's in my on-demand, which is available 24 hours a day. Wah! So yeah, definitely check that out. And the last thing I definitely wanted to say is that tomorrow and the day afterwards, we will be examining low-level replays. We'll be examining your replays from specifically D to C level players. And the idea is when we're watching those games, we'll be thinking of techniques of how to improve. I'll be doing things like taking vision off the player, taking vision off the opponent, watching both things, talking about the times that we're doing things in our builds, so that way we can really see how to improve fundamentals. Because I'm doing all this high-level strategy analysis stuff, but a lot of times you'll get a player who can think at the same level I can, but just can't build stuff. You know, he'll let his money get up to like 2K, 3K, something like that, and as a result, he'll lose a bunch of games. And he actually won't know why. He'll be thinking, but I do everything right. Maybe I need to change strategies. And the answer is, no. Keep doing the same strategy you're doing. Just do it better. So, yeah, tune in tomorrow and on the day afterwards, because we will hopefully be looking at your replays. And tune in because I will announce who I chose. So yeah, thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. That was Day 9 Daily number 26. If you want to be sending me replays, PM me on Team Liquid with an explanation of why I should do your replay and to a link of the replay. So yeah, thanks so much, everybody. Take care, and ta-ta.